Yo, what's going on, guys? Arekkz here, and today I want to talk to you about Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. This is, of course, the next title by From Software. I had a chance to play it at Gamescom today, and it is really good. Tough as nails, you'll die a lot, but it's really good. So in this video, I want to talk to you about my hands-on time, talk about my impressions, some of the different systems, some of the things I encountered, and give you a chance to just look at some gameplay. So in the background, it's my complete run from start to finish. In the demo, we only had a chance to play through up to the end of this kind of mini-boss, so to speak, this little sort of ogre you fight. However, after that, we were able to play a little bit further. Wasn't able to record it, but I'll talk to you guys about that in just a moment. However, before we get started, if you guys do enjoy this, then a like would be super appreciated. Comment down below, let me know if you guys are Soulsborne fans, if you're looking forward to this title. And also, if you haven't entered the God of War PS4 Pro giveaway, don't forget to do that as well. Now, to begin with, Sekiro is, as mentioned, the next title by From Software, but it's very different in its own right. In the same way that, say, Dark Souls and Bloodborne are very different, Sekiro also stands in its very own space. It's also very different in terms of setting and theme. Obviously, is a big departure from, say, the Gothic or the Victorian themes. We're now going over to the East with a sort of Japanese setting, steeped in mythology, things like that. However, one of the first things I want to call out with Sekiro is actually the sort of underlying combat system. Now, each of the sort of From Software titles, while yes, you can play them in, whatever way you want, ultimately they kind of revolve around a sort of theme. So Dark Souls is a little bit more defensive, Bloodborne is a lot more aggressive, and Sekiro is more about parrying. Parrying in this game is incredibly important, and it's kind of funny because for me, parrying is probably one of the things that I do least in games. It's one of the things that I'm not always that good at. I basically play Dark Souls with an agility build so that I can roll, because that's kind of what I do instead of parrying. But in Sekiro, you need to learn to parry, because it is an incredibly important part of gameplay. Now, one of the core things that happens during fights is the fights revolve around this system called posture. Now, posture is essentially a means to break the defense of your opponent. What happens is when you're fighting, there's a little bar that appears above their head. Now, when you're fighting, quote-unquote trash mobs, they'll go down very quickly, so you might not necessarily pay attention to this too much. But when you're fighting something slightly more meaningful, then you'll see this, and it's a very sort of evident part of the fight. When you're attacking them, whether you're landing the strikes or whether you're kind of attacking their guard, then this bar begins to build up. And of course, when you're parrying them, that also happens too. Now, when you max out the posture bar and you break their posture, this basically makes the opponent vulnerable. And at that point, you will then be able to go in for a lethal strike. Now, again, for some of the weaker trash mobs, this will be a one-hit kill. For some of the bigger enemies, the ones that have, say, multiple life bars, then this will take them down one notch. But either way, this is kind of the general flow for combat. So obviously, yes, you still can dodge, you can still jump, you can dash around, and of course, you now have your grappling hooks. You can pull yourself up into the sky if you are near a point that you can grapple onto, so that of course adds a whole degree of verticality to gameplay. You can climb up things, you can drop down and do like plunging strikes on people, so there's definitely a different aspect to it. But parrying is incredibly important, because of course when you have attacks coming your way, if you can parry them and you can then follow those parries with attacks, then you can really build the posture bar quite fast. You can break the posture, and of course you can dispatch the enemies a lot quicker. Because of course if you do play it slightly more defensively, you play it slightly slower, then if you don't attack too much or too frequently, then that posture bar will go down. And while you can kill the enemy without breaking posture, you can just chip away at their health bar. That's obviously the slower and far less efficient way to play the game. So that's kind of how your combat flow will roll. You'll attack them, you'll parry, you'll kind of have this blend of attack and defend, and of course you'll then go in for those lethal strikes. There are some moves you can't parry. If you see a little symbol, a kanji appear in red from an enemy attack, that means you can't parry that one. So attacks like that you have to dodge. And there are some other ones like the stabbing attacks, you can dash through them instead. So there's different ways to sort of kind of counter things, but parrying is without question an incredibly important part of combat. But on top of that, you also have your prosthetic arm. So on right bumper, you have your typical light attacks for your sword, but on your right trigger, then as opposed to having your heavy attacks, you have your prosthetic attacks. Now the prosthetic arm has different functionalities. So in the demo, we have 3 options. You either have the heavy axe, which is really good at breaking shields or guard of, the kind of more shielded defensive enemies. You have the shuriken, which is just like a projectile, good for kind of picking off enemies high up that you can't reach. And you then have the flamethrower, or the kind of like flame arm, so you can then fire out this flame burst, set enemies on fire, and I believe you can also use it to light your blade on fire. I didn't get a chance to do that, but I saw that in one of the trailers. So That's really cool because, of course, that adds another whole dynamic to your gameplay. You're not just focusing on your sword, you're not just focusing on light and heavy attacks. You, of course, factor these in. Some of them are quite slow, like the axe, for example, has a very slow startup time, and if you're fighting some of the faster enemies, it can be quite hard to get that in. So, of course, that's where the parry posture system comes in. You might parry their attack, making them slightly more vulnerable, giving yourself the window to use the slower, heavier, stronger attacks. But of course, on top of that, the other mechanic is the death mechanic. This is one of the things that's unique and very different about Sekiro. Because of course, in previous games, if you play things like Dark Souls or Bloodborne, then of course when you die, you lose your souls or equivalent, go back and get them, and of course that's kind of part of the gameplay loop. But in this one, if you die, you can resurrect yourself at that location, and of course you can use that for tactical advantages. If you die and then an enemy walks away thinking, you know, that they finished you off, you can then resurrect, and of course you can then go and stab them in the back. Keep in mind, you can't do this indefinitely. If you resurrect yourself and then you get killed very soon after, then you are dead and you'll go back to your previous save point. But this is, of course, a very different way to play the game. It also seems that when you play through, you don't obtain kind of quote-unquote souls in the conventional sense, because progression in this game seems to factor slightly more around your character specifically and the abilities that you obtain, say like your prosthetic arms, as opposed to creating a character and then spending points and speccing into certain different attributes to sort of play in the way that you like. So it's a slightly more fixed experience, but there are still a ton of different ways to play to, of course, tackle the enemies, tackle the environments, things like that. So it is a really, really cool game. Now, for the demo, that's basically it. I kind of got to the end. I fought the mini boss, so to speak, the little ogre with the wooden panel around him. He had some kind of cool aspects to it. You can use your grappling hook in combat to kind of pull yourself up to his head so you can get closer and do some damage. But after that, I did get a chance to explore a little bit further. I didn't get to record it, but I did get to go and face the monk, which is one of the bosses, the tall character with the beads around the neck and the spear. I only had a chance to fight it once because we were running low on time, and it completely destroyed me. But that boss there also emphasizes just how important parrying is, because in that fight, if you're not parrying, you are going to get completely and utterly destroyed. But anyway, for the time being, that's pretty much it. That was a quick look at my Sekiro gameplay. Those were some of my hands-on impressions. I really, really enjoyed it. It is one of those games that, of course, you really do need to perfect the combat art and, of course, master that parrying system. But I genuinely can't wait to get deeper into the game. So, if you guys enjoyed this, let me know. If you want to see more from Sekiro, then also let me know. And, of course, as and when opportunities do present themselves, I'll try and bring you guys some more gameplay. But until then, thanks for watching, take it easy, catch you next time, peace out.